Let's watch.
I think the issues are, for me, more straightforward. First, let me give you a background and ask you to confirm it with every senator in the 10th Assembly. My view is we must not rush in making laws. Every clause, every word must benefit from scrutiny. And so, rushing, pam, 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 at the end of the day, we have made a couple of mistakes a couple of times, making laws that are in conflict with existing law that the 10th Assembly has made, or even more seriously, making laws that are in conflict with the Nigeria Constitution. And the only way to avoid those avoidable errors is to allow for proper debate. Anything you want to do, whether it is rule changing or law making, it is important that senators have the benefit of advanced copies. Read it, study it. That is why we are supposed to have, and we do have, legislative assistants. So if you don't have enough time, you can commit it to your staff to look at it in the light of existing law or existing national constitution. But you bring important rules to the floor of the Senate without anyone having previous opportunity to look at it, and you discuss it there and then, and you pass it. Now, I have two issues on that day. The first is that I raise point of order. Order the rules of the Senate, because the Senate president was emphasizing that he has the power to interpret the rule. That is correct. But only after the point of order has been raised, he has the power to decide, and that is the interpretation, whether the content of the point of order, as written in the rules of the Senate, have any relationship with the matter at hand. In this case, I specifically raised under 70, after all the other arguments about the morality, the appropriateness of changing rules that are working. They say if it is not broken, you don't mend it. Now, those were rushed. Now, I ask for the floor to raise my right, which the presiding officer cannot deny. That is Order 70. What is in Order 70? Order 70 is the very same rule that Senator Abaribe raised when we were amending the Electoral Act. It says, basically, that once it is raised, the Senate president is obliged. It's not out of his discretion. He must divide the House. The benefit of that is that when you are dealing with very serious matters, the constituents needs to know who voted for what or who voted against what. But much more importantly, also to be sure that what has been decided is a reflection of the views of the majority. But it is very difficult when you say the nays and the ayes, the presiding officer will choose what he heard loudest. That is not appropriate for important lawmaking or important rule changing. So I raised that point of order, and he declined to allow me to raise it. And I said, no, it is my right so to raise it, but it is his right. When I raise it, he will ask me, under the rule, to read it out. When I read it out, both the presiding officer and other distinguished senators will be able to make up their mind whether that point of order is relevant to the matter at hand. And nobody can question the fact that when you want to change a rule, it's literally not rule for ourselves now, rule for the future. For the incoming senators, we are trying to change the rules that brought us and make more rules for those who are coming. Why not allow the next Senate to make their rules? But anyway, that for me was a procedural issue. So when he refused to allow me to raise that rule, the point of order, the following day I attempted to raise it again while they were adopting the vote of proceedings. Now some people say by the rule, I saw a couple of comments that doesn't seem to understand the issue, that I should have allowed the vote of proceeding to be passed before raising point of order. They don't understand the rules. Now, once you have passed the votes of proceedings, then you can no longer question it. Now, I wanted to question the validity of the votes of proceedings because in my judgment, because the House was not divided, even when I asked for the floor so to do, anything he did or anything that the Senate did without following that procedure, which we are obliged to follow. In my judgment, it's an act in futility. And that is why he tried to ask us to pass the vote of proceedings, whether they are a fair reflection of what was agreed, and whether to challenge the legitimacy and the validity of those votes. That was why I raised the point of order before adopting the controversial amendment. And as you can see, there is no better evidence of the danger of rushing than the fact that the following day, that same day, the following day, the Senate has to go through the humiliation of revising itself that it has made laws or rules that are in conflict with the Nigerian Constitution. Why should we make that mistake in the first instance? I was also suspicious that that day the Deputy Senate President had engagement in Kano, he was not around. The Senate leader also had engagement, he was not around. And I was suspicious why this change of rules will be made when these two senior principal officers of the Senate are not present. All of that raises that as to what was the intention. And let me also say this so that I can save your time. I watched your reaction to it, Ruben, and I believe Rufai too. You thought that these are elite issues. It's about who gets this, who doesn't get that in the next Senate. And I'm like, no, this is not a deep reflection before coming to that conclusion. Why? Because when African elites, particularly presiding presidents, in this case, President of the Senate, seeks to amend the Constitution to allow for another term, as we have seen in Cameroon, as we have seen in Uganda, as is already happening in this country that has been making progress, but I think Kigali is headed toward the same direction, where sitting president begin to tamper with the rules of tenure. That is how dictators emerge. And if it is their privilege, if it's an elite issue, whether or not a man should perpetuate himself or not, by the time they begin to do so, it is the proverbial grass that suffers.
But Senator,
when the key issue is
Senator,
stay put. So that's it.
Senator, no, one clarification.
Yes, sir.
You know Senator Adeniyi Adegbomire, SAN, who is chairman of the Judicial Committee, he issued a statement saying that what has changed now is the procedure. The point about how the initial decision contradicted Section 52 of the 1999 Constitution, which was, your main objection. And that now they have agreed that you don't have to take an oath before you can be eligible to vote. But the other issue about eligibility, Senator Adegbomire was saying stands, which is that you must have stayed in that parliament consecutively for 2 terms before you can be eligible to be appointed as a principal officer of the Senate. Is that clarification, is it correct?
Yeah, what SAN Adegbomire said is correct. And that is why I say the fight is not over. Because even the current Senate president, Godswill Akpabio, did 4 years. Subsequently, he lost election to the Senate and he became a minister. Now he came back this term and he became Senate president. If you add the first term plus the current one, he would not have done 8 years. Indeed, he's probably doing the 4, 5, 6, maybe he's approaching 7 years now. So if 8 years is a minimum requirement, he doesn't have the right to preside because he has not acquired the qualification. Right. If he got it in error, it has to be corrected. So that is why you don't make laws with people in mind. Number 2, there is another thing that Adegbomire did not amplify. And that is the word consecutively. If you say consecutively, it means the first tenure of the distinguished Senate President, Akpabio, in the 8th Senate will not count because he was not in the 9th Senate, and therefore is not consecutive. Strictly speaking, by the interpretation of the rules that have been made, he has only done, he's approaching 3 years as a senator for the purpose of ranking. For the purpose of ranking.
Okay.
And I hold the view that this is just, for me, is not adding value to the process. Nothing stop any senator from being Senate president for as long as first his people elect him or re-elect him and his colleague accept him. There is no shortcut to it. That is why I gave an example of distinguished Senator David Mark. He held that office for 8 years. And all he needed to do to hold the office for 8 years was to earn and sustain and service the trust line between the Senate presidency and the distinguished senators.
Okay.
Oftentimes you will hear David Mark saying, the senators are my bosses because they elect me. Because the only right you have is the one your constituency conferred on you, namely to be a senator. To be a Senate president, you are first among equals. And you know, when we turn our back and allow small things to happen, that is how Africans produce dictators that become bigger than their own country. That was just my point, nothing personal about it. I mean, for example, I know that what has informed that rule is the most publicized fact that there are a couple of former senators, like Ideta said you have to. Perhaps the most compelling case, obvious case would be that of Senator Oshiomhole, who was a deputy Senate president. Now he comes back to the 11th Assembly, assuming he wins. And then you say it's no more ranking because it is not consecutively. Or Senator Okowa, who was a senator before going to become governor. Exactly the same way as distinguished Senate President Akpabio was senator, and then he lost election, he became a minister, and then came back to contest and become senator again. And he was considered as ranking. Now this amendment says that once it is not consecutive, you are not ranking. You cannot even be, not just Senate president, you cannot even be a principal officer. How fair is that?
Very interesting point.
And quite a number. Nobody knows who is going to win the next election.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying that, you know, as a matter of morality, you don't make law either for yourself or make law against specific individuals that you fear will come. That is the beginning of the road to life, presidency, and dictatorship. That's why our neighbors can elect a 93-year-old man in Cameroon.
Very true.
It is someone or 90-something years old man in, you know. That for me, those are the issues, nothing personal. Akpabio is my friend.
Okay.
But anybody who knows me knows that my friendship is important, but the country is much more important than my personal relationship with anyone.
Okay.